That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I'm actually really excited to record this video here, and please let me know if y'all want me to do this, as we go through this offseason, because really the information that we are going to have with where these players are going to go in the NFL draft, while we'll never know for sure until the draft's actually here, it will only get better from here on out. We'll have more information with the NFL Combine. We'll be able to see the teams that are going to different pro days, see the teams that are interviewing different prospects, and obviously we'll have those leaks that we don't have access to, but we can read about them on Twitter, and we can get more accurate mock drafts. But for the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the lab. We're just going to pull up, I believe I went to PFF Mock Draft Simulator. There are a ton of mock draft simulators all across the internet, and we just hit randomize. So we just hit simulate a mock draft, and we're going to go through and we're going to do a dynasty rookie mock based on if this was the real NFL draft. And of course, the main reason that we are doing this is to illustrate the randomness that we have at this point of the offseason. You've noticed this in dynasty fantasy football leagues pretty much over the past 7 years. Like if you played Dynasty back in 2014 and you were just listening to a bunch of different Dynasty fantasy football podcasts, people really wouldn't start diving in depth with their rookie draft classes until you got to past the Super Bowl. Until you were mid-February, that's when you would get the first looks of those rookies coming in. Well, now people have been very confident to go out there, including ourselves, and start to evaluate these players at the end of December. And while, yes, we can do that, we can have a lot of fun with it, we have to understand that we have such a small glimpse. We have a tiny window into the information that we need to accurately evaluate these players. And still, a lot of this needs to be played out. So there's going to be a lot of randomness that we can't account for right now, while we want to act like we are just experts with this draft class. Truly, nobody watching this video, nobody making content is an expert at this point. So let's go through, let's dive into this random draft and say, if this is how it plays out, where are we going to be drafting these rookies? But of course, before we do it, please make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Leave a comment letting me know how this is never going to happen in real life, because I agree with you. And also, if you want access to our Dynasty rookie rankings, if you want access to our Dynasty startup rankings, if you want to get in a Dynasty league with us, if you want to get in our Dynasty group chat, you want a fantasy, if you want anything, that can all be found on Patreon. The link is in the description. Let's dive into this with the 101 Treylon Burks. Now, I know a lot of people are probably excited to see where Treylon Burks goes. And in this draft, Treylon Burks went as, I believe, about the 4th or 5th receiver off the board, which is something that we've actually seen in a lot of mock drafts at this point, that the NFL maybe is not as in on Treylon Burks as the Dynasty community. And I am the first person saying draft capital matters, draft capital matters, draft capital matters. Yes, we need to be evaluating these players from a Dynasty fantasy football context, but when Josh Allen goes in the top 10, when Justin Herbert goes in the top 10, and Justin Fields falls to the middle of the first, we need to pay attention and we need to listen to the NFL and adjust our values. And that's why we were the people going out there and drafting Josh Allen, drafting Justin Herbert when everybody else in Dynasty hated on them. And that's why we were drafting Trey Lance over Justin Fields. But what are you noticing? You're noticing with those players, I'm talking quarterbacks. We can do the same thing at the running back position. Actual NFL draft capital at receiver actually doesn't matter nearly as much, because with receivers, it's just a completely different stance of who's going to be valued from a fantasy football perspective and get the volume versus who's going to be valuable for their NFL offense. So I'll be fine drafting Treylon Burks as the first receiver off the board in dynasty drafts, even if he was the 4th or 5th receiver off the board in the NFL draft. And here, Treylon Burks ends up going to Kansas City. Now, with Treylon Burks, obviously I love him. He's our 101 if you pull up Patreon right now, regardless of landing spot. If he goes to Kansas City, there's not going to be a single person in Dynasty Fantasy Football that won't have Treylon Burks at their 101 spot. I'll say a lot of the running backs that y'all like landed in horrible situations in this mock draft that we'll get to at the end of the video. But with Treylon Burks, he goes to Kansas City. You're looking at Travis Kelce aging out. Travis Kelce only 6 months younger than Rob Gronkowski. And then at the same time, obviously Tyreek Hill is a great receiver, but Tyreek Hill doesn't need to get 11 targets a game. So Treylon Burks could come in and not even getting up to the 9-10 targets a game. He could still easily be a dominant wide receiver 1 in fantasy just based off efficiency with Patrick Mahomes in that elite level offense. And I think that's, a realistic landing spot for a round 1 wide receiver. Now, I don't know if Treylon Burks is going to fall all the way to about pick 29. That's where the Kansas City Chiefs were picking in this mock draft. But still, it was exciting to see that nonetheless. Please, if you think that there's no chance that this happens, if you think that there is, please let me know in the comment section, because as someone who loves Treylon Burks, I was excited to see this. And then it looks like the number 1 receiver in the NFL draft this year that's going to be going off the board is going to end up being Garrett Wilson. That's exactly what happened in this mock draft as well. Garrett Wilson goes as a top 10 pick to the Atlanta Falcons, and he's going to be our 102. I mean, he's our 102 at this point regardless. But if you're looking at Atlanta, this is an offense that has no Olamide Zaccheaus next year, no Russell Gage next year, Calvin Ridley once out. And I mean, I know that they can go through, they can re-sign Russell Gage, they can re-sign Olamide Zaccheaus. They probably are going to re-sign one of those players. I believe Christian Blake also may be a free agent, but regardless, I mean, there are going to be a lot of targets available in Atlanta this upcoming season. And now Atlanta obviously was horrendous this past year, but they can't be worse than what they just were. And if you're looking at Garrett Wilson, this is a receiver that very similar to someone like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, to back in the day when you had Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, back when you had Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, back when you had Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, these elite level college wide receivers that play in the same offense. Garrett Wilson was actually never the wide receiver 1 at Ohio State. I mean, his sophomore year, you actually had Chris Olave as the wide receiver 1 at Ohio State. His junior season, you had Jackson Smith-Njigba, who, I mean, in that 2023 draft class, you are not going to believe how good of a prospect he is. He looks like he may be a better prospect than Jamar Chase, but we'll get to him next year, of course. But with Garrett Wilson, still, he had the minimum production profile that you're looking for in an offense that had multiple other top-level wide receiver prospects. If he goes in the top 10 of the NFL draft, I'm not really going to have any questions, especially if he finds his way to a decent situation with a lot of targets available like Atlanta. And now the 103, I mean, I know that this looks like we're just copying and pasting our Patreon rankings, because this is how we have our 101, 102, and 103 ranked over there on Patreon. And if you pull up our Patreon rookie rankings, you're going to see that they're broken down into tiers as well. I have Superflex rankings in tiers. We have 1 quarterback rankings in tiers, but our top 3, regardless of if it's 1 quarterback or Superflex, is going to be Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson. Then at 3, we have Drake London. Now, Drake London gets, I mean, a ton invested into him in this draft. He actually goes the 110 to the New York Jets. Now with New York, I know a lot of people want to get excited just looking at the fact that this offense was a lot better. Zach Wilson was a lot better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning. I'm still hesitant to say that this is going to be an improving offense next year. They'll be slightly better, but still, you're going to have Elijah Moore. Now, what's interesting is you have, I believe, both Braxton Berrios and Jamison Crowder as players that are most likely not going to be with this team this upcoming season. So you could kind of see it shape up to where you have Corey Davis and Drake London on the outside. You move Elijah Moore to the slot, which is kind of where he played at Ole Miss. Now, Elijah Moore can play the flanker role. He can play the speedy slot wide receiver. I would love to see Elijah Moore as that slot wide receiver. And with Drake London and the size on the outside, he would be an immediate red zone threat with Drake London. This is someone that started producing at 17 years old at USC. 17 years old with Amara St. Brown, as well as Michael Pittman in that offense. Drake London is a dominant wide receiver prospect, which is why we have him as our 3rd player ranked right now in Dynasty Superflex rookie leagues and Dynasty 1 quarterback leagues. Going to be very excited about him. Now, going down to the 104, we are going to be treating this as a Superflex rookie draft because, I mean, it's a lot easier to do Superflex so people who play 1 quarterback can watch it. No, hell, I just got to move the quarterbacks down the board. But at the 104, I'm going to have Matt Corral here. And with Matt Corral, he actually falls a little bit in this mock draft. He falls to pick 18 to go to the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is something we talked about last year. And one of the many reasons we did not like Justin Fields was the situation he found himself in. And I really want to continue to talk about this for these rookie quarterbacks. Why did we love Trey Lance? I mean, there are multiple reasons that we did, but one of the main reasons, he goes to an organization in the San Francisco 49ers with a great coaching staff, a great offensive line, great skill positions around him. And we're going, I mean, he is getting put into a situation where it's almost impossible for him to fail. Everything is set up correctly for Trey Lance to be that next great quarterback. And very similar with this situation with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, to be able to go to that Sean Payton offense where we've seen guys like Taysom Hill have success. to be able to go through and just be with that coaching staff where we have seen them have success year after year after year. And of course, I mean, a big reason in that is Drew Brees, and there's a 0% chance. I mean, of course, that nothing is a 0% chance, but there is a 0.1% chance that Matt Corral is anything close to Drew Brees. But he does have some mobility, some rushing upside, where we've seen him get to 500 rushing yards in a collegiate season before. And if he's going to be able to find himself in this great situation with mid-first round draft capital, where we'd imagine that he would get a shot to start near the end of the season or possibly the beginning of the year, dependent on the Jameis Winston recovery time period, I think that Matt Corral would have a fantastic landing spot here. And then our 105 is going to be it would be one of the most polarizing picks. If this happened in the NFL draft, Kenneth Walker would be one of the most polarizing picks in Dynasty. Because here, Kenneth Walker goes at pick 61, doesn't really get the draft capital, but he finds himself in the landing spot of Kansas City. Now, y'all know I am of the opinion that Kansas City most likely wants to do something at running back. I mean, clearly Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a colossus failure. Now, I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire maybe is someone that we should be holding in Dynasty, however, just because, I mean, if you're looking at the resources the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have, I'd imagine it's going to be very difficult for this team when they're paying Patrick Mahomes $50 million a year to go through and to have a draft like this. I don't know if this is just PFF and their mock draft simulator. They're going, you know what? Let's try to get whoever is running this simulation. Let's try to get them to screenshot this and post it on Twitter, yada, 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 to get traffic. Maybe that's why they have the Kansas City Chiefs taking a wide receiver in the first and a running back in the second round here. I'd imagine it'd be very difficult for the Chiefs to decide to actually do that. However, if they did, and of course, we're playing the what if game at this point. If they decided to take Kenneth Walker with their second pick in the NFL draft this season, you'd imagine that he immediately supplants Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the starting running back on that team. Because with those actions taken by the Kansas City Chiefs, they would say, we do not trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been a failure. We are going to invest a significant amount for his replacement. So while I think this doesn't happen, while I think that this is probably the first spot in this mock draft that I'm going, you know what, I'm calling BS. If it were to, Kenneth Walker would be the starting running back for one of the most productive offenses in the NFL. I would be slightly concerned that he's not going to get targeted out of the backfield, but still, I mean, just knowing the touchdown upside that you would have if you could be an athletic running back in that offense, it would be massive. Now, going over to our next player, it's going to be the 106. Speaking of quarterbacks going to good organizations that we want to be investing into, like Trey Lance last year, Desmond Ridder for the Pittsburgh Steelers going at pick 20. Now here, if you're looking at this, he goes as the third quarterback off the board, and he goes ahead of Kenny Pickett, who we'll talk about in a second. And if you're looking at 9 out of 10 mock drafts at this point, all of them have Kenny Pickett as either the first or second quarterback off the board alongside with Matt Corral. As we've discussed, there's a lot of randomness at this point of the year. I mean, this is a random simulation draft, and I'm sure we're going to be doing a ton of these, and we're going to get much better information going forward. But with Desmond Ridder, if he were to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, you'd imagine that Pittsburgh is losing the combination of Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington this upcoming season. But at the same time, they do have Claypool, they do have Deontay Johnson, they do have Najee Harris, and the craziest stat ever. And I know there's a lot that goes into this, and I know just looking at someone's record is not necessarily indicative of a single individual's performance, but with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin, I believe the stat is 15 winning seasons in a row. Stepping into that has to be great. I know we're talking dynasty fantasy football, but I mean, going and just looking at the draft class last year, looking at where the rookie quarterbacks were, Jacksonville, the New York Jets, and the Chicago Bears with Matt Nagy. To be able to find a quarterback that does have rushing upside, we've seen that from Desmond Ridder. Now, yes, the level of competition wasn't there, but a big thing is we have seen over the past 10 years that a lot of those quarterbacks that come into the NFL that fail, Ohio State, Alabama, big programs where they have the best offensive lines in college football, the best receivers in college football, and then they go to horrible NFL organizations and they just kind of flame out. We saw this with Dwayne Haskins. I don't want to list off a couple of the recent names because I know we're going to get some hate in the comment section. But I mean, a lot of those quarterbacks that come from nowhere and I mean, are massive hits at the NFL level. Josh Allen, the perfect example. I mean, you don't need to be a quarterback coming from a massive program. I mean, if anything, maybe you want a quarterback that's from I'm not going to go down that road. Regardless, if Desmond Ridder goes in the middle of the first round to a team where he's probably going to start right away in that organization we have seen historically, I mean, be a very competent one, I think you could be very excited. And now our next player is going to be a quarterback yet again. We're just knocking out the quarterbacks here. Sam Howell goes at pick 15 as the first quarterback off the board in this mock draft to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I'm not taking Sam Howell ahead of Matt Corral or ahead of Desmond Ridder because they're all very similar with, I mean, where they actually have their NFL draft capital. However, with Sam Howell, I'd be a little bit hesitant given the fact that he would most likely be stepping into a quarterback competition with Jalen Hurts. And this is something I really want to talk about. We've been talking about this all year. Jalen Hurts was a fantastic guy in the 2020 Dynasty rookie draft season just because you were getting him at the beginning of the third round in 12-team Superflex rookie drafts, and he had all the rushing upside in the world where you knew if he was going to be the starting quarterback for Philadelphia, you were putting him in your starting lineup right away. However, this entire season, from a Dynasty fantasy football perspective, we were saying, hell, you probably want to go through and look to sell Jalen Hurts because if you're looking at the team investment that they have into him, he was selected in the second round. Historically speaking, those quarterbacks don't have nearly the same level of leashes that you would see with someone like, I mean, Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, some of those quarterback busts that busted at the highest level, but they're still getting 4 years to start, just given the fact that they're top 3 NFL draft picks. I think that with the Philadelphia Eagles having 3 first-round selections in this year's draft, I mean, all of them in the middle of the first, where you're expecting these quarterbacks to possibly go off the board, I think there's a real shot that you actually have Philly deciding to take a quarterback and just having a competition in Philadelphia this upcoming season. And if they were to take Sam Howell with the 15th pick overall, of course, we're playing the what-if game, but I think that would most likely indicate that they're probably planning on starting him in the long term there over Jalen Hurts, but I definitely would prefer Matt Corral or Desmond Ridder going to better organizations with less competition. And then our 108 is going to be Kenny Pickett, who fell all the way to pick 26 in this simulation. Obviously, most people are expecting him to be a borderline top 10 pick in the NFL draft, but he goes to the Miami Dolphins here, a very similar situation to what you would see with Sam Howell. I'd imagine that Kenny Pickett would step into a quarterback competition with Tua Tagovailoa, and if he fell this far in the NFL draft, I mean, there's a real chance that Tua would win that quarterback competition, and Kenny Pickett would find himself into a Paxton Lynch situation where he never really gets the chance to start. He finds himself in a Jordan Love situation. We've seen time and time again that those quarterbacks that get selected at the very end of the first round, it's not like they're guaranteed to be Lamar Jackson and start right away. I mean, in reality, I think that with Kenny Pickett, there would be a chance that if he were to go to Miami, he's never starting, but just given what you would have with the upside, I think we would probably have to take him over some of these receivers. But now let's go back over to the receiver position to round us out. At pick 109, we're going to go with Jahan Dotson for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, with Dotson here, this is a wide receiver I know a lot of people are excited about. I would be more excited about the landing spot with Buffalo as you're looking at Emmanuel Sanders, going to be a wide receiver that is most likely gone. Gabriel Davis, completely removed from the offense at the beginning part of the season. They had to get him involved at the end of the year just based off of necessity alone. Clearly, this is one of the best passing offenses if you're looking at the volume of dropbacks from Josh Allen in those spike weeks that you could have. So I'd imagine that Dotson would come in and he would be able to be an immediate starter given how many 4 wide receiver sets that they actually run. I mean, I don't know if you'd be able to put him in your Dynasty starting lineup, but from an NFL standpoint, he would definitely be an impact player. Now, our 10th rookie off the board, I thought about this one for quite a while. I know people are probably not going to agree with me on this, but Chris Olave. Now, Olave falls to pick 28 to the Detroit Lions here. I mean, obviously, that's going to the Los Angeles Rams first-round pick that they traded to get Matthew Stafford. But with Chris Olave, he'd be stepping into a situation where he'd presumably be the wide receiver 1 automatically on that Detroit Lions offense. I know a lot of people are wanting to say, Mason, you idiot. Mason, you bum. No, that's obviously going to be Amara St. Brown. I am still of the opinion that I think St. Brown's production at the end of the season was mainly dictated based on the opportunity that was in that offense, not necessarily St. Brown's talent profile himself. I would say that if Chris Olave is going to get selected in the first to this team, and I know a lot of people hate Chris Olave because he was the third receiver for Ohio State his senior season. And I mean, if you hear that just from, a process standpoint alone, you hear that a receiver, their senior year, is the third guy on that offense. Of course, he's going to fall down draft boards a ton. I mean, this was someone that a lot of people thought was going to be the wide receiver 1 in this draft class this upcoming season, and he has fallen for a great reason. But it's a little bit of a unique situation where, yeah, Garrett Wilson's getting a massive bump for outproducing Chris Olave as a junior, where Chris Olave was a senior. They were born like 20 days apart. They are the same exact age, and Chris Olave, he's going behind Garrett Wilson in this draft. Of course, you prefer Garrett Wilson. And also, he's competing with Jackson Smith-Njigba on that same offense, a receiver that's literally, if he was in this draft class, would probably go as a top 3 NFL draft pick, and he would be 5 tiers ahead of any other player. Like, I think Olave, a lot of people are down on him for solid reasons, but you have to read into the situation a little bit more. I'm going to be fine taking him at the 110. Then Jameson Williams is going to be our 111. He goes at pick 21 to the New England Patriots. I'm not a big fan of Williams because if you actually go back to 2020, whenever he was at Ohio State before he transferred, he wasn't able to get on the field. You had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, outproducing him to the highest level where, it was like, I believe each receiver close to 900 receiving yards, and Jameson Williams down there less than 200. It was laughable. Obviously, transfers has a lot of success at Alabama. However, a devastating injury at the very end of the season. If that was a Drake London scenario where it happened earlier in the year, I'd be probably fine writing off that injury for Jameson Williams. But this is going to be a receiver that actually is not able to participate in rookie minicamp. He's not able to participate in the NFL Combine, not able to go through probably for the preseason, and probably going to miss the beginning of the year as well. And if you're going to be going to the New England Patriots here, we have seen historically that the Patriots are not good at identifying those rookie wide receivers. So we're probably going to be passing. And our 112 is going to be David Bell, who went to pick 53 for the Las Vegas Raiders. With David Bell, you'd imagine he would be the wide receiver 1 for the Las Vegas Raiders, but it would be a pseudo wide receiver 1 situation where you got Darren Waller there. Darren Waller getting 30% of the team's targets. Of course, not only do you have Darren Waller soaking up the majority of the targets, but at the same time, you actually have Hunter Renfrow, who Renfro's going to man the slot. He's going to get a considerable amount of volume. So even if David Bell is playing a little bit more on the outside, it doesn't really matter. There are going to be so many targets going to the other players over the middle of the field here for the Raiders that even though they have a massive hole at wide receiver, I think that you have to be a little bit less excited about this situation just because of Darren Waller. Now, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, Mason, where the hell's Breece Hall? Mason, where the hell's Isaiah Spiller? You forgot them back at the 104, the 105. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen, but I think right now, a lot of people, including myself, we are too confident in being able to predict exactly what's going to happen in the NFL draft. Whether or not that's the order that these players go in, whether or not that's the landing spot that these running backs get. Remember, every year there are running backs that go to spots that you're not expecting. Travis Etienne to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Javonte Williams to the Denver Broncos. Todd Gurley just taking everything away from Trey Mason back in that 2015, I believe 2015, yeah, that was that 2015 draft class. And here you have some pretty bad spots and these running backs falling a considerable amount. You got Breece Hall going to pick 71, which, that's exactly in the range that most mock drafts have him in. He's supposed to be an early 3rd round pick, which I'm fine. If you're an early 3rd round pick, if you have that 3-down profile and you're landing in a spot that you have perceived opportunity, I'm still going to be taking you highly in dynasty drafts. Now, Breece Hall actually goes to the Chicago Bears, which I know that not many people are expecting the Bears, including myself. I'm not expecting the Bears to take a running back, but it's a possibility. Let's not act like there's a 0% chance that this would happen. So if Breece Hall would go to Chicago, I'm imagining that he is playing second fiddle to David Montgomery. David Montgomery's still going to be the starting running back there based on what we have seen with Montgomery so far his NFL career. So I would not be taking Breece Hall ahead of any of these players in the top 12. And Isaiah Spiller really gets shafted here. Now, I don't want to say there's a 0% chance. There's a small chance that Isaiah Spiller falls this far. Right now, he himself is supposed to be going at the beginning of the 3rd round if you're looking at the majority of mock drafts. However, he falls to the beginning of the 4th round in this mock draft. Actually, this is the very end of the 3rd. This is like Alexander Madison type range. But he goes to the Tennessee Titans, which, I mean, is also a real possibility considering the fact that they have no guaranteed money to Derrick Henry. And just say if Derrick Henry were to go down with a devastating injury at the beginning of next season and they owe him a total of $0 guaranteed for 2024, and then all of a sudden they're looking at him saying, "Hell, why are we going to bring him back, pay him $12 million?" They would probably just, instead of bringing back a 29, 30-year-old running back, just look to Isaiah Spiller, who would they have on their second or third year of his rookie deal. So both options are actually small possibilities. And if they were to occur, I would not be taking either running back at the top 12. That's why if you run over to Patreon real quick, you'll see that Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, we are going to have them lower than most people because I'm a little bit concerned with the NFL draft capital. However, if Isaiah Spiller does manage, or Breece Hall managed to go at the beginning of the second round in a very similar range to what you've had with Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor over the past few seasons, then I would be willing to jack these players up to tier 1 with these other wide receivers, because NFL draft capital may not necessarily matter too much at wide receiver, but it matters so much at running back, trying to predict the opportunity that they're going to get in year 1. Obviously, opportunity equals fantasy points, which equals massive shifts in dynasty value. But of course, thank you so much for checking out this video. Really hope y'all enjoyed it. Please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, let me know how stupid I am and how this is never going to happen. Subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And that should be it. I hope you have a great day and hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.